Hello, chat. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Bug Hunt. We got a first timer. Hello and welcome. Okay, Devin. 1 year subscriber, and this is your first chats. We love to see it. Logan, Sugoi, Topplebell, Misukisu. Lyndon, you're home. Excellent. Hello. Oh, here we go. People are checking in now. Fuzzy Emu, Goddess, Paper Jules, Nikki, Dan, Greyfly, Liz, Josh, Silvera, Smiley, Tired Eyes Taurus, Jamie, Misukisu, familiar faces from my stream not too long ago. Roxers, Emerald Pigeon, LPB, Russian, Shrimp Baby, Sown Starlight, Serenade. That's a fun name. I like that one. Sleepy Bunny, Sushi. Tortilla, yes. I did in fact see that. Speed bongin. Hello. Yes. To make sense of Tortilla's mysterious posting, for those of you not aware, for about 2 hours before this stream right now, I stream over on my channel, and we were looking at beetles today, and somebody asked, and we ended up getting on the topic of praying mantis ears. And I learned tonight that the praying mantis ear is on the underside of the body between the second and third pair of legs. Now, the ear is on the midline of the body and appears to be a dual structure kind of coming from both sides. It's an ear, but it sure looks like something else. Y'all will have to join the bug cord to check that one out. I did, before we dive into anything, we'll see what we end up finding tonight. I did want to have a bit of review over what we talked about last week, because I started to give you some information, but I didn't have a lot on that specific topic at the time, because it turned out the story I was trying to remember was from a conference talk that I went to 6 years ago. And so it was there somewhere in the back of my brain, but I could not for the life of me remember the details of what I was talking about. We were talking about insects during wartime, and we more in depth talked about the general who would pin bugs into his helmet and famously served with Napoleon and was very happy that the bugs stayed intact during the battle. We also talked about the medic who had ordered a butterfly net from an entomology supply company during the middle of World War One. But the story that I was trying to tell, and again, just had vague whisperings of, Amanda, hello. Welcome in. Welcome to Bug Hunt. Was about this couple who had been building a really, really big collection of ants. And then what I had told you last week was that it was during some war and they were lost, like the collection was stored in the jungle for some reason during the war, but then it survived. And that was not a particularly fulfilling story. There was a lot of detail left out of that. But since I had the time this week to go back and add all the links and stuff to the chat's recap, I wanted to elaborate on that story just a bit. The guy's name was James Chapman, and he was at Harvard. He was at Harvard during World War II. He was in the Philippines collecting ants when the Japanese invaded the Philippines during World War II. And from the article on antwiki.com, it says Dr. Chapman continued to collect ants even as Japanese soldiers were hunting him down. Fortunately, he survived capture and incarceration, and his collection, which he had hidden, was largely intact. So that is the story that I was talking about. During World War II, he ended up building this like jungle bunker to hold the ant collection. He got captured, put into an internment camp, survived, escaped, went back after the war was over, and the ants were fine. So that was the story that I wanted to talk about. And apparently they wrote a book about it, him and his wife. And the book is also listed in the chat's recap. It's called Escape to the Hills. I have not read it, but the whole PDF is there. If y'all would like to, I am going to try and read it or get a copy of it myself because I think that's just a really neat story. And that book is their memoir written by them about that process. So I don't know how much of it is ant based and how much of it is like war survival based. But surely it talks about the ant collection a little bit. So I will try to track that down and maybe we can have a further discussion on it in a couple of weeks. We're pinging. I'm sorry. I was not muted on Discord. Oopsies. All right, where are we at? 52? A little bit chilly. Goodreads has a single 4-star review. Incredible. Well, maybe the Alveus community can bump those numbers up. I don't know how widely available it is. I don't know anything. I just found out about that not too long before we started here. But anyway, how's everyone doing? Anyone found any cool bugs lately? I know that the pollinator garden is starting to pop off. Lyndon, the new horticulturist, has been busy in the bug cord sharing photos from there when she gets the chance. There was a dusky wing skipper. There was also signs of somebody starting to use the bee hotel, which is very, very exciting. It's still a bit early, even for what I would call early season bees, but not all of them come out after it gets warm in the spring. Some of them do start to show up when it is still a little bit cold out. And so part of the reason why having that either standing habitat like old dead pieces of grass and leaf litter, or having some human-made alternative like the bee houses, is that it gives them the cover to be able to basically stay warm even if the temperatures do drop again. So glad we're starting to see some more life creep back into it, which is very exciting. Even though we still have potentially some colder weather still coming up, but always good to see. Several bugs in the last couple days. All right, let's see. Uh, my friend ushered a wasp out, opened a window, and it flew up to where the window was, but still closed. Yeah, they'll do that. They'll do that sometimes. We were just talking about insect vision on my stream again, like I said just before this. Um, and the way that insect vision works is that they have all of those little different individual cells in their eye, and their vision gets better the more of those cells or facets that there are. So it's sort of like increasing the resolution on your monitor. If you have a very small eye with not very many facets, you're only going to be able to see in like 480p. While if you have a lot and you have really highly sophisticated vision, like something like a praying mantis, that's going to be like your 4K. You can see more and have more refined sense of what's going on around you because you're able to differentiate blocks of color and presence better if you have more uh, quote unquote pixels. Personal bug win is I took a cricket and set it free outside at work. Love to hear that. Mo Money Mia, hello. Does anyone else have any specific bug questions or concerns or comments? I do have a bug news story that I wanted to talk about that's been out for a little bit already, but we have not brought it up yet. So I do have something if no one else has any questions. But it does look like we have our first insect of the evening. There's something squirming around here in the middle of the screen. It does look like an inchworm. I'm waiting to see that left half move. Because it could be a regular worm that's still stuck in the ground on the left, or it could be a caterpillar or an inchworm. But I would like to see it move. How many legs does an inchworm have? That's an interesting question, Jen. Um, 6. That is, insects have 6 legs. So that is seemingly the snarky answer. But butterfly and moth caterpillars also have these things that are called prolegs. So it's insect, not worm. Yeah, so an inchworm is, yeah, it's doing the thing. So an inchworm is actually a type of caterpillar for the geometer moth. And so up at the front, so the piece that's waving around right now, that is the head end, and that is going to be where the true legs are. And then there's a big gap in the middle of the body. But then the back, the pieces that are holding on to that leaf that it's, moving around right now, it's holding on to that with what are called prolegs. They're not true legs because they're not segmented, but caterpillars operate with what is called a hydrostatic skeleton. And so they're basically able to pump blood or their equivalent of blood into these little balloons on the back. And the pressure from the liquid inside of them getting pushed into those things allows them to grab on. And so they can retract the legs and release that water pressure. There are two right now. There's a second inchworm on the right hand side. Juso, your first chat chats as well. Welcome in. Thank you for being here. So they're able to pump liquid into this hydrostatic skeleton to allow them to basically inflate those pro legs and grab onto material at the back. So they only have 6 true segmented legs, but then they have other pairs of pro legs after this big gap in the middle, and that big gap is one of the characteristics of an inchworm specifically. Other caterpillars will have pro legs, but they will all kind of go, they will go further up the body than on inchworms. The other thing specifically about butterfly and moth caterpillars is that they have crochets on their pro legs. Crochets are like the little hook part of Velcro. And so, because they don't have claws on their back legs, or on the pro legs, I should say, they still need a way to be able to hold on to the plant or the stem or whatever it is that they're walking around on. And they have these little sets of hooks that are like the hooky part of Velcro that, again, when they pump the the hydrostatic skeleton liquid into those legs, it allows them to grab on. There are some bee and wasp larvae that look a lot like caterpillars, but they're not. That also have pro legs, but those pro legs do not have crochets on them. So that is a caterpillar specific structure that allows them to hang on, and it's part of their the pro legs. I did see some other questions. Let me go back up real quick. All the buggies sleeping. That's funny. Does lacewing larva have real lichen on it, or is it purely disguise? I saw it on a Will Neff stream the other day. Great question. They actually have lichen on them. So it doesn't grow on them specifically, but those lacewing larvae do a behavior that is called debris cloaking. So they have a wax, like a sticky wax that they produce that allows them to attach little pieces of dust and dirt and lichen and tree bark and sticks and twigs or whatever. Very, very small pieces. But it allows them to camouflage themselves by putting these little pieces of debris on themselves. So they don't, it's not like sloths that grow the algae in their fur because they move so slow. The larvae are not growing the lichen, but they are taking pieces and specifically attaching it to themselves for camouflage. Geometry moth. That's funny, Mouse. So that's how, that's actually how I remembered what that family looks like. I'll post pictures later in the Discord during the recap, but they have very angular wings, like they're not rounded on the edges, they're very, very sharp and pointed. And so I always made that connection is that geometer moths, the family Geometridae, had geometric wings. So that always kind of helped me connect the dots on there. Is there a reason that they move the front of their bodies in a circular motion? I think it's going to probably just be detection of where to go next. Their larvae in general have very poor vision. So, because it was on the top of a leaf, it was probably doing that circular motion to try and find out where it wanted to go next. Worm maggots, all of their fleshy insects without hard exoskeletons. What are their actual gutty contents? If you break one of them in half, are those actually the guts or are they mostly water? Well, it's guts. Larvae, their goal is to level up, essentially. and go through that metamorphosis process. And so, in order to do that, it takes a lot of energy. And so, proportionately to their body, a lot of their systems, like the stomach and that things that go towards growth and body regulation, are larger. So, a lot of it uh, inside of the fleshy bits is going to be stomach contents and fat bodies for them to be able to store energy to go through that big process of going into a pupa, like a cocoon or a chrysalis, and then coming out on the other side as a totally different looking organism with wings. So there's a lot of fat and food storage that goes on inside of there. Maggot, legs or prolegs? Neither, actually. Maggots are apodal, which means that they do not have legs at all. That means if you see a little larva that has legs, it's not a fly. Is it the antlion that uses the body of its prey as armor? So I personally have seen I have seen lacewing larvae that had uh, pieces of other insect in their defense mechanism or in their little debris cloaking thing that they had there. Um, but the thing that famously does that is an assassin bug. Debris cloaking ant suit assassin bug. So yes, the one that famously does that makes the entire camouflage out of ant carcasses is going to be an assassin bug rather than a lacewing. So it's not going to be a little delicate flitty thing like we see with the lacewings. It's going to be a true bug, so it has a piercing, sucking mouth part that I will use to impale its prey items and then suck out the gooey bits like a Capri Sun. So it's the same mechanism though. They also have these like sticky secretions that they use to attach uh, those ant carcasses to themselves. So it's a very similar behavior. It's just a different preference for what the material looks like. Things try to look like ants or will defend themselves by attaching ants to themselves because ants, if you are a small other predator, ants are a pretty scary meal, honestly, because they're colonial. So when there's one ant, there's often many ants. They can bite and they can sting. And because there are many of them that can bite and can sting, there's often backup nearby. We got Hank, or Frank, I guess. This is outside Hank, so this is Frank. Let me finish this thought and we'll talk about millipedes then. Um, so the idea behind debris cloaking with ants is to make it seem like you are a piece of wood or structure that has multiple ants on it. And something about the chemical smell of those ants, but also just the appearance of ants, gives you protection, which is why there are a lot of leaf hoppers that have modified pronoda that look like ants, or you have moths that have wingtips that look like ants. It's all in a guise of like trying to look like an ant because an ant is a scary thing in nature to have to deal with because there's often not just one ant. Um, Calypso at all is doing great. There was a huge video. I did a feeding of them last Monday, and we watched the ant colony for about 2 hours feeding on a cricket, so it was pretty cool. And we've lost Frank. Martin, what I know about lacewings is half of the posts on what is this are lacewing eggs. That's very funny. So lacewings, going back to ants again, lacewings will lay their eggs up on a stalk. And so it's this very long, thin thread with a little white ball at the end. And for whatever reason, they will oftentimes lay them in a circle. And it looks like a little Stonehenge almost. If you've never seen them before, it's quite funny. I had a set on my front door that I was watching for a while, um, but that's quite funny. That's something that shows up a lot on r/. What is this? Frank is under the leaf. Oh, thanks, Russian. I guess I'll post the link in the recap then when we're done too. But very funny. We've got to find a Frank. Wild dream bug to find. Veggie muncher, you gotta flip over more logs with your life. Um, Millipedes, as we know from Hank, are detritivores. So they're going to be in generally kind of damp areas with a lot of decaying organic material, which is leaf litter, rotten wood, mushrooms, fungus, that sort of thing. So if you have any foresty areas nearby, flipping rocks and flipping logs is always a great way to potentially find millipedes. But if you do go bug hunting in that way, flipping over structure, the number one rule for being a good steward of the environment while doing that is to always, always, always put the rock back. If you have a really big log or a really big rock that you feel comfortable that you're going to be able to pick up and flip one way, but you don't think you'll be able to put it back how you found it, do not flip that rock. So part of the reasoning, and the really big one, is that the interface between the soil and the rock is a very, very specific habitat type. Phew. Excuse me. I didn't have time to mute myself on that. I apologize that I just sneezed in your ear. Um, that interface is a very specific habitat. And if you don't situate things back the exact right way, that habitat under the rock. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you. Um, if you lift up that log or you lift up that rock, you're one ripping the roof off of somebody's house. So, like, how would you feel if that wasn't put back exactly how you found it? Um, but also in really warm or very like dried out climates, particularly, that seal that the rock creates with the ground keeps moisture in, which is why it makes it a really great place to find stuff. But if you flip the rock and don't put it back at all, or put it back but like carelessly and not doing your best to get it as close to exactly how you found it as possible, you've now broken that seal, and a lot of that water is going to be able to evaporate, and it's not going to be as valuable as a habitat anymore because you have now flipped it. So, any point, if you're looking for bugs and you're flipping rocks and logs, which is a very beginner friendly, very easy way to find stuff, please, please, please put it back. Um, because after you're done appreciating the bugs, you can then put it back and make sure that their habitat goes back to as close as possible, so then they have a really fun story to tell their friends. about how an alien abducted them for a little bit and took some pictures and then just put them back. You don't want to have them tell the story where they got abducted by aliens and then the alien destroyed their house too. That's just no fun. Will they get squished when you put the rock back? Ideally, not. Um, so the soil under rocks and under things is usually pretty compacted, but it's still fluffy enough that they'll be able to indent. Plus, they've been able to squeeze under there. So, not only, I guess, do I recommend putting the rocks back and only flipping rocks that you're sure you can put back, I would even extend that to only flip rocks that you know you can put back in a controlled manner. Because if you have a really heavy thing and you've got it up and you just let it completely fall, they will probably get squished. But if you put it back nice and gently, uh, the chances of that are a lot lower. So be responsible with your bug hunting and always try and get the habitat back as close as possible to how you found it. Our good buddy Frank has reappeared for us, and I appreciate that since I completely missed his last appearance. Completely disappeared under a rock for us, but everyone welcome Frank the millipede. So, how do we know this is a millipede and not a centipede? Millipedes generally will have this much rounder body form that we're looking at right now. And they also aren't going to be moving as quickly. He's nice and round, nice and chill, going slow because he is a detritivore and he's just looking for rotten leaves and stuff on the ground. Centipedes, which are closely related to millipedes, are generally going to be more flattened from top to bottom, so they're going to be flatter, and they're also going to be predatory. So they're oftentimes going to be a lot speedier because they're tracking down other invertebrates to feed on. The other really big thing is the number of legs per body segment. So centipedes, that starts with a C, are in the order Chilopoda, Chilopoda. So centipede and Chilopoda are synonymous, and I always think of cent as like 1 out of 100. So there is one pair of legs per body segment. Millipedes, on the other hand, are the order Diplopoda. Diplopoda. Now, di means two, and pod, like podiatrist, means foot. So Diplopoda have two pairs of legs per body segment. So with the IR, you can sort of see these rings. Oh, look at that. You can see each one of the individual segments as the body is moving past the camera. And each one of those rings will have four pairs of will have four individual legs on it, two pairs of legs per ring. So when millipedes are born, they grow additional segments as they grow. So you can find very, very young millipedes that, only have 10 legs. They're only like 8 segments long or whatever. Uh, Mags, thank you for the bits. Love what you guys do. As a natural resources major, you all inspire me so much and love the recent developments. Wish you could give more, but thank you so much for what you do. Thank you, Mags. I am not generally the Alveus staff that you get with donations, but we appreciate you all the same. This one's got 38 legs. Topple Bell, I think you're probably off by quite a bit. So they're like the snake game. Yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, they as they grow and eat more, they get longer. Yes, but they do have a determinate size, depending on the type of millipede. They found the first actual millipede like 5 years ago. Milli is the thing for 1,000. Dan, they're under the mulch. You just missed them. Millipede would mean 1,000 legs, but they had never found an actual millipede before. All of the millipedes that they had known prior to 2021 did not have 1,000 legs. But in 2021, in Australia, of all places, they found the first true millipede with 1,000 legs. But not only did they find a millipede with actually 1,000 legs, they found a millipede with 1,300 legs. So it wasn't like, oh yeah, it was close. It got there and it was like 1,002. No, no, no. They went right past it. They went right past it. They went from like the previous record, which was like 800 and something, all the way to 1,300. So it completely made the jump. Of course it was Australia. Back to back pain and oh, emotes really encapsulates it's over. We're so back. That's funny. Rebel, of course the big bug is in Australia. Well, it wasn't that big. It all things considered. Um, I I'm looking at the paper right now. What does it say? 95 millimeters long, which is 3.5 inches. I think. I think that's about right on my conversion. Um, which would be smaller than Hank. So, not the biggest millipede in the world. But then the largest millipede in the world is actually the African giant millipede. About 0.4 inch. A lot of it legs in a small area. Sure is. And Dexter, yes, it is in fact a millipede. A wild one. This is not Hank the ambassador. This is his cousin, Frank, outside. But the giant African millipede is the largest millipede in the world. It only has about 256 legs, but it is a whopping 13.2 inches long. That is 33.5 centimeters. So about 4.5 times as long as the millipede with the longest legs, but having about 5 times fewer legs. Distraught because Lyndon yelled at me. I would be upset by that as well. That would send me into a spiral that I could never get out of. For the 1,300 legged one, did they count the segments or each leg just to be safe? I would bet that they counted every leg. I'll link the Push Pop has gotten really skinny. um I will have to read the paper again and see if they counted the rings or counted the segments, or how that worked. But I imagine they probably did both, just to make sure. And the record holder here, um, the longest one that they found with the 1,306 legs was a female, which is good because if it were a male, the leg count would be off. I think it's the 7th pair of legs in a male millipede are going to be modified into gonopods, which is the sperm transferring mechanism in millipedes. They don't have a dedicated organ for it, and they don't quite do the loot drop that the scorpions do, that Maya talks about during the collabs. But when millipedes mate, they will essentially hug. They go head to head and belly to belly, and that's how the sperm transfer happens. But on the male, the thing that actually delivers the sperm is a modified leg, and so if or is I think a pair of modified legs on the 7th segment. And so if it were a male millipede, the number would not be 4 legs per segment, which is quite interesting. Yeah. Oh my god. So, sorry, I'm learning. I'm learning things as we're doing this chat chats. I still have this paper up that's describing this new millipede. Uh, Discovered 60 meters below ground in a drill hole created for mineral exploration. So that millipede that was like 3.5 inches long with over 1,300 legs was down 60 meters in the soil. What was he doing down there? I guess what was she doing down there is the question. Yeah, I'm gonna really have to read this paper, and I will for sure link it in the Discord when we're done here. But yeah, lots of learning about millipedes happening. 200 feet. Yeah, 60 meters, Lyndon. That's what it says. Unless M is a different is a different measurement than I thought. You guys are killing me. She knows something we don't. Girl can't even go underground and be left alone. Didn't want to be found. minches. Of course. How can I forget about minches? All right. So that's millipede news, even though that's 5-year-old millipede news at this point. Um, I do have another fun bug news thing that came out in December that I wanted to talk. Can you age a millipede? It's not quite like counting tree rings, but if you know what species it is, you can guess roughly how old it is based on how many segments it has. Um, they only develop the external reproductive features after they become adults. So the adults have a determinate size, and after they reach that sexual maturity, they will not grow anymore. That'll be their end size. But no, I don't think there is a consistent way across all millipedes to know how old they would be. Um, but that was the first millipede that they found, the first true millipede that we found. Um, Now we're going to move on to ticks. And I know ticks are not everybody's favorite bug. And there's a lot of good reasons for that in terms of like distribution of and uh, transmission of human diseases and diseases to animals and things like that. I know, I know. I promise. I know that they're not everyone's favorite. But there was some really cool news that showed up in early December. Oh, Lyndon, no. I'm so sorry. Pile of ticks is awful. That's an awful measurement for a number of ticks. Um, but there was this article that came out in the American Entomologist in December, and it is recapping the story of a grad student that was working at Harvard who was searching through the collection for ticks on other specimens. So, ticks are not only a mammal thing, there are also plenty of ticks that are specific to reptiles and lizards and things like that. And so, this grad student named Kaylin Chong, and I again will link this article for everyone in the recap when we're done here. She was looking at, and she quotes, a bunch of iguanas from the Dominican Republic that had tons of ticks. So she was going through the other parts of the collection, trying to find these parasites that were still on the organisms when they got collected. 4 is still too many. I agree. um, So she was going through the rest of the collection, pulling the ticks off of these other specimens. And again, she started this. This whole thing started because she was looking at ticks on an iguana, and she had the iguana out on the table, and somebody from the ichthyology collection next door. Ichthyology is the study of fish. So maybe you can see where this is going. One of the ichthyology curators came by and said, "Oh, hey, we have some ticks in our collection." And so if you've put 2 and 2 together, someone in the fish collection said that they had ticks somewhere in the fish collection. And that's not right. That does not seem like it should be correct. Because ticks can't survive underwater. There is something else in this article, which is another crazy fact to me. Some ticks can remain underwater for how long? How long do you think a tick can live underwater? 4 hours, 3 seconds, a week, at least 7, 3 days, longer than expected, 24 hours. You're really not going to like this. Some ticks can remain underwater for 70 days. 70 days. How? Why? Impressive. Nightmare fuel. Too long. Why? What? I agree. I had these same thoughts. I had these same thoughts when reading this when reading this article. That's crazy. There's no citation for that, but I bet I can track one down. Because that's important for the thing of the story. So this next sentence doesn't make it better. 70 days and possibly longer as nymphs. But there's never been a record of ticks feeding on fish. There has been records, and apparently they've tested how long ticks can survive underwater. But they have never been found feeding on fish. That is until this fish curator came up and talked to this grad student here. What was her name again? Haley? Kaylin Chong. Host bloodstream, they don't suck blood for that. 70 days without oxygen, but also food. Correct. So mussels, oxygen in the host bloodstream could be a thought, but they're not known to feed on anything that's been underwater. And so they're not getting the fish sticks is very funny. I like that way more than I should. So no, they're not getting oxygen from the blood because insect and arthropod oxygen intake does not involve the mouth. They're feeding with the mouth, but they're breathing through spiracles or book lungs or like some other structure, but they do not breathe out of the same area in which they're feeding. So there's no way that getting oxygen from the blood would happen. So I don't know how they're hanging out for 70 days underwater. I'll have to try to find a reference for that. But anyway, back to the story. They went into the fish collection and they found 2 ticks attached to an electric eel, which is also really cool. You know, it could have been attached to like a minnow or something, but no, it was attached to an electric eel. And the ticks weren't just on the outside. That was it saltwater or freshwater? Electric eels are freshwater. So this eel had been collected over 150 years ago in Brazil. And so not only were the ticks like associated with that eel, they weren't just like on the skin, they were embedded in the skin. So it's not like, oh yeah, they pulled it up and like happened to drop the eel on a tick and then it got preserved that way for decades and decades. The ticks were actually feeding on the eel. So they were feeding on the eel. They had their mouth parts still inserted into the eel. And that's about where we got. So the news story, the breaking news that came out in December was that the first ever record of a tick feeding on a fish. Oh, Emerline, thank you. Thank you so much. I was going to have to look for that afterwards. But I'm glad that it's here already. How do they do that? That's a great question, Flumgoon. I've got no idea. Or do you mean how do they embed? When I mean embedded in the organism, I meant the mouth parts were inserted, and so they were attached to the eel, like they would be attached to, a human or a cat or a dog. The mouth parts, or the hypostome, is what it's technically called, is inserted and has things that basically hold it in place, and they can also sometimes cement themselves to things. So the whole tick was not embedded in the skin. That was potentially a my bad in terms of phrasing. But the mouth parts of the tick were inserted into the electric eel, which tells us that the ticks were at least attempting to feed on this eel and not just happen to be sitting on the eel in happenstance as the eel was collected. They don't really know how it worked. In the in the article, which again I will link, they say they don't know how it happened. It's possible that the eel was pulled from the water and then left on the bank for a little bit, which then allowed the ticks to crawl and feed on it, or if the ticks were somehow feeding underwater. It's unclear, and unfortunately, there's only so much you can learn from natural history specimens where you can't really observe what was happening 150 days ago or 150 years ago in Brazil when this eel was collected. But it does tell you about the interaction that it happened. And so now people could potentially go back and do other experiments with ticks and fish to see what that's all about. So that is the fresh new buggy news that is actually over a month old at this point. But yes, now you are all aware now of fish space ticks. I will leave the article in the Discord after we're wrapped up here. Which is going to be right about now. That was a speedy one. I felt like that went by super quickly. But as we always say, Time flies when we're having fun. Good chats, everyone. I appreciate you all being here, as I do every week. Everyone, please give a hand for Logan, our wonderful camera operator, through thick and thin, and bug spotting and not. He is our faithful driver. We always appreciate it. You've heard me mention the bug cord, ! Bug cord will get you there. It is the Alveus Associated Bug Lovers Discord. So if you have a question throughout the week that you don't want to wait until next Wednesday to have answered, you can post it in there. People will post their fun bug finds around their house, will help you with ID, post their cool bug merch that they get. So fun place to hang out. Specifically this week, Alveus Chatter Fern is working on a class project about overcoming fears of insects. And so if you are in the bug cord and you have any experience or feedback with having been or currently being afraid of bugs and how you have managed and dealt with that, there is a Google form in the general channel that I will also post in the recap tonight. So please fill that out to help your fellow chatters with their college project. There is also a role selection channel in the bug cord. If you so choose and you are interested in more bug content, I do stream on my personal Twitch channel, which is Eventomology. On Wednesday nights, I do about 2 hours right before chats looking at and learning how to identify beetles. During the other streams, we do a little bit of gaming. We do a lot of looking at stuff with a microscope. So come feel free to hang out there if you would like. The role selection channel will give you Discord notifications for when I go live personally on my channel. There is also the Alveus Clips channel, which is run by one of our lovely community members and can show you the highlights and all the fun animal activity that you might miss while you are at work. So please check that out on YouTube's. And then lastly, rounds. In about an hour, we will go over all of the animals one more time with the cameras before we all head off to bed. I know, Logan. My hand is off the keyboard. I'm not going to start it this week. But rounds, we take one more look at the animals before we kind of all go in for the night, just check on everyone, make sure they're okay. That'll be in about an hour from now. Lyndon has a final update. The Coreopsis leaf beetles are just about done eating. They're just lady beetles lingering and hunting for stragglers. Very nice. Very nice. Oh, thank you, Tortilla. I that does make sense that I can activate it because I'm a mod. But yes, so rounds will be in about an hour. Otherwise, I am going to head off for the evening. Thank you, chat. It has been a pleasure as always. I will see you back here, same time, same place, next week. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Talk to you next time. Bye.